Hello and welcome to this episode of the Gene Keys Exploration. My name is Shelly Szigli and I am a Gene Keys guide. I'm excited to be sharing with you an exploration of each of the gene keys, starting from the first gene key, moving our way all the way through to the 64th gene key. Disclaimer, these episodes are really just about sitting with the energy of the gene keys and literally, at times, reading from Richard Rudd's book. The gene keys are so vast and complex, and as a guide, I don't remember much of the information, so we're going to be exploring these gene keys together. You can find my work at www.genekeyrecordkeeper.com. And other than that, I just hope you enjoy the show and enjoy this exploration. Please feel free to share it, leave us a review, and tell us how this exploration was for you. All right, everyone. Hello, Shelly here. Welcome to this gene key exploration. We are about to dig into the 13th gene key. And this gene key recording has been really interesting. This is my third time pressing record. External to me, I live on a farm and the animals have been going wild. So I feel like this energy that is around this gene key is incredibly useful and important to share with you today. So I'm excited to see how this gene key comes forward, and also admitting that I know very little about this gene key. It is not in my chart. I have not studied it. So this is my first time really digging into it. Now, the shadow of the 13th gene key is discord. The gift is discernment. And the city is empathy. Now, in Richard Rudd's book, Embracing Your Higher Purpose, the Gene Keys book, he has it titled Listening Through Love. So we are going to dig into this. I'm reading from the book, directly from the book. And once I get that intuitive nudge to stop reading, I will stop reading and we'll start talking about and reflecting upon what we're reading. So the shadow of the 13th gene key is discord, the chemistry of pessimism. The 13th gene key concerns a single theme, the theme of listening. Through this gene key, we will see how many dimensions there are to the art of listening and how deeply tied it is with the expansion or contraction of human consciousness. At the shadow frequency, this is the shadow of discord, which is the inability to listen to and learn from your experiences in the world. Listening is entirely different from hearing. Hearing refers to the acoustic absorption of auditory information, whereas listening is something that can only be done with your whole being. Often listening requires withdrawal and time in order for it to function effectively. Listening is also highly linked to the way in which you process your life experiences on an emotional level. The link between listening and the emotions has profound implications for the future of this gene key, and in particular, its shadow frequency. Because of the global mutation currently taking place in the solar plexus system of all human beings, our emotional chemistry is undergoing some extraordinary changes, and the 13th shadow will be affected by these changes. Well, let's keep reading. Along with its programming partner, the 7th shadow of division, this genetic partnership exerts an enormous influence on the direction of humanity as a species. These two gene keys are prime programming agents for the way in which humans interact at a group level. They actually cut far deeper than the tribal programming archetypes within our genome, which also affect our interactive capacities. The 7th and 13th gene keys steer the one consciousness of humanity along the line of our destiny. Whilst the 7th gene key pulled you towards the future, the 13th urges you to listen to and learn from your past. This archetypal placement within your DNA gives these two gene keys different from all the others. as though they were somehow outside the scope of human influence. It is the battle waged within the frequencies of these codes that decides your future. The 13th gene key in particular is one of the most important of all the 64 gene keys, since it involves the way in which you process your past. OMG, guys. Let's keep going. I just feel like keep reading. And you know what? We're going to keep reading. Discord refers to the inability to escape your own past. Stacked within the human genome lies a library of collective human experience. And your inability to process all of this memory is what keeps you locked into the same self-destructive patterns. The 13th shadow shares a very important chemical connection to the 30th shadow through its link with the same genetic codon signature known as the ring of purification. The 30th shadow, the shadow of desire, is where the connection between your ability to listen is weighed against the raw force of your human desire. This codon, which codes for the amino acid known as glutamine, is one of the great human genetic battlefields. Interestingly enough, there is now a large body of scientific evidence linking this amino acid to various functions and malfunctions in your gut. Symbolically, one might draw a connection between how effectively we human beings process our past and how effectively our body eliminates waste. The force of human desire found in the 30th shadow usually outweighs our ability to listen to our past experience, and this leads us once again down roads that do not serve humanity as a whole. Okay, I'm going to read one more paragraph here. The problem is rooted in the human emotional system, and this 30th shadow of desire is the core of it. Because desire cannot be sated in its current form, it influences the direction of the whole human race. Despite what has happened in our past, we go on making the same poor decisions and judgments. This sets up a global frequency of discord, in which we can clearly see where we have been going wrong, but are unable to remedy it at a collective level. An example of this is the current threat of global warming. We can see the damage our lifestyle is doing to the long-term future of the planet, but our desire outstrips the energy to do anything about it. Anyone who has a deep knowledge of human history will see the same cycles being repeated over and over, but each time with different nuances. It is true that today there is a more global awareness of the problem than ever before. However, this awareness does not change human behavior. We hear the discord that we are creating, but we do not listen to it. In the end, our emotional urge to satiate the desire within always wins. That sums up the dilemma of the 13th shadow. Wow. Okay. So I feel like before we move ahead, just taking a moment to let all of that sink in. He's talking about the repeated patterns that happen on an emotional level and a physical level, and how we humans get stuck in being more controlled by the desire than in doing the right thing, correcting the pattern, and moving outside of the past loop behaviors. And this is on an individual level, this is on a societal level, and even a collective level. So this discord, it's going to be really interesting to read about the repressive and reactive nature of this, which we're going to do in a moment. But just take a minute and feel into that. As I'm reading this and tapping into the energy of this, before I got into this particular recording, my animals were just going nuts. I had to re-record this 3 times. The dogs were barking, the cows were charging, the horses weren't budging. What is a normal scenario for my animals was turning into this real, I don't even know what it was. It was very strange, discord between my animals. So whenever I'm out here recording or digging into these gene keys, I do take into consideration what's happening around me. And even right now, as I'm talking, there's one particular cow who's locked onto me. Her eyes and her eye contact and her energy is head on straight towards me. So I feel like the energy around this shadow is big, and so big that just having the intention to dig into this frequency and tapping into it has set off the energies on my farm. So I find that interesting, and I wanted to share that with you guys because this shadow of discord is clearly huge, and clearly we need to be listening, not just hearing this message today. And remember, like I read at the beginning of this 13th gene key, it's easy to hear, but listening is a whole body interaction. It is probably why I refer to these explorations as activations, because if we are truly listening, not just with our mind, but with our body and our energy, there we go. The cows are now going and leaving. This is good. This means that they're feeling an energy balance. If we're truly listening and allowing and processing, it shifts the energy that is in opposition to that. So I'm really listening myself, even to my own words as I'm reading them. I'm allowing my energy to really be open, to really hear the shadow and the gifts and the city that come forward. But also inviting you to just open up a little bit deeper, maybe open up your heart, maybe put your shoulders back, push out your chest a little bit, become really aware of your sit bone, your root, and the different parts of your body, even your feet, and allow this message, this information to come through, to really come in. So you're being invited to really listen, like really, really listen. So the repressive nature of the 13th shadow is permissive. These people pretend to be empathetic and sympathetic to others, whilst at the same time doing nothing. The repressive side of this shadow may make a show of listening to everybody, but it soon becomes apparent that they have no real backbone. These people are permissive in the sense that they let others walk all over them without learning anything. They will agree with you no matter what you say. They mistake hearing for listening, and in doing so, they cut themselves off emotionally from others and from their environment. This is one of the deepest forms of emotional repression that does not want to take in the pain-pleasure cycle at any time. So it sacrifices both extremes and settles for a false sense of safety. Now, I want to talk about something that's really interesting about the newer generations. So my oldest daughter is 23, and I have the pleasure and honor to work with other individuals around this age group. Now, there is a real appearance of listening and communicating with this age group in terms of they know how to answer questions. They know how to explore deeper. They know how to affirm what you're saying. So it can really appear that they're really deeply listening. However, on an energetic level, and this is from my observation, there's a listening because they know it's the right thing, but there's not necessarily a deep integrating, like he's talking about here, of listening. It's more just, I'm doing what I know is right, and the right thing for me to do is to ask questions. The right thing for me to do is affirm what you're saying. These are the right things. However, there is the real sense that, oh, right, they are doing the right things, but they're not actually hearing it. They're not actually taking it in. And it can be a really difficult energy to work with because they're not doing anything wrong. By the book, everything is right. So I often wonder how it feels to be inside of their bodies and their realities, because you can tell that even when there's deep conversation, they're not really integrating what's being said. They're hearing it, but yeah, it's like Richard's talking about, they're not listening to it. So the energetic shifts aren't being made. It's kind of, I don't know, like the other day I was thinking, wow, it's kind of sad, but is it sad or is it just part of it? I don't know. Some of these things to ponder. So the reactive nature is narrow-minded. When discord manifests through a reactive being, it becomes narrow-minded or bigotry. These people will disagree with you no matter what you say. Narrow-mindedness is getting stuck in a reactionary emotional pattern and then making a lifestyle out of it. These people are literally unable to see beyond the limits of their own desires, and they are filled with pessimism. Their philosophy is founded upon the fear patterns that have guided all human beings to where they are now, and they are not open to the possibility of real change. Such people harbor a deep bitterness about the nature of human beings, and this comes out the most frequent as anger, especially at those who do not see the things their way. With such people, it often becomes their mission in life to debunk the views of those who are optimistic about the future and about humanity. Interesting. So I think we all know those people, right? And if you're listening to this, it's likely that this particular shadow isn't super heavy in your world or in your life. However, it probably is also likely that you come across this shadow quite a bit, right? Because people like us, we like to share optimism. We like to share new ideas. We like to share things that have really helped us. And this type of reactive nature in the shadow of discord just wants to shut you down, is determined to shut you down, has decided even before you're speaking that they're going to shut you down. So this can be a really frustrating energy. And a lot of people I feel that connect to the black sheep archetype know this energy very well. It's that you're already individually put into a box that they have decided before you even speak, before you even share something, that it's incorrect, that you're extreme, that you're all of these different things. However, the funny and ironic part is that years later, when the very thing that you're sharing or trying to share is now a norm, they totally accept it because society has said, this is now what we do. They accept it and they forget that they heard it from you. So it's a very interesting shadow, and one that I believe people like you and I experience quite often, or at least are familiar with. And you could be here and maybe that hasn't been your experience, but you are aware that it is the experience of other people, right? You can connect the dots with it. So we are going to go into the gift. So the beautiful gift of this 13th gene key is discernment. And he has it written down here, the fellowship of man. Wow, guys, buckle up because I feel like this is going to be big. Discernment emerges as your emotional nature comes more and more into awareness. As you realize how deeply in the thrall of desire you are, you begin to understand the whole of humanity as well. Out of this incredible swelling of awareness arises the 13th gift of discernment. Discernment begins at an individual level as you come to see how deeply your view of others is connected to your feelings. Only when personal feelings are witnessed and examined can you begin to see things in a more objective manner. Over time, your personal agendas become more lucid and you reclaim the ability to listen to others and the world from a broader perspective. At this level of frequency, you become fully aware of the desires coursing through your body. And although you cannot do anything to stop them, you are no longer the victim of them. For the first time, you have your own individuality clearly, and you realize that something else exists behind that individuality, a kind of witnessing awareness that is greater than your sense of individuality. This is the birth of your ability to listen. Wow, right? It's so interesting because at this point, we're aware of our desires, we're aware of our pulls, our patterns, all of these things, but we're also aware that there's something outside of ourselves, that there's a different reality, there's different options, there's different perspectives, and we're not so consumed by our own egoic path that we're opening to truly listen. I love that. Back to reading. With the rising of your discernment comes many gifts. It may appear to you now as though a great veil has been drawn back from the world. As we have seen, the 13th gene key is a repository of the collective past experience and memories of humanity. Instead of reacting out of this karmic library, you now begin to demystify your own past. What you may have thought of as a random series of experiences can be seen as following a discernible pattern. Yes. Without being caught in the drama of subjective emotional personification, you can begin to view life as at a mythic level. This mythical thinking is the way in which the mind interprets your ability to listen behind the veil of your desire. To view life at a mythic level is to see the great archetypes playing out in our lives, both our personal lives and the greater collective history of man. Through understanding your own past in this way, you can see that the storylines of all individuals play out variations of the same themes. At this level, we can recognize these same archetypal themes in every culture's rituals, fairy tales, legends, and myths. Once you stop viewing life on a subjective, emotional level, a new landscape of feeling opens up inside of you. This feeling is the early manifestation of your future ability to transcend your emotional system, and it is experienced as optimism. Optimism is the gradual swelling of awareness within your solar plex system, transferred and projected outwards into the world. Yes. One might also view it in the reverse. The awareness connecting all life forms is received and drawn into the solar plex system, thereby expanding your sense of self to include a far wider reality, the true fellowship of man. Through our cultural heritage, whatever it happens to be, we are all embedded with the myths, stories, and archetypes that we need to eventually transcend our own emotional dramas. All the world's stories, rituals, and beliefs have grown out of the very infrastructure of our DNA, which is why the same patterns emerge over and over throughout history, regardless of culture, geography, or even isolation. Okay, so have you heard of Joseph Campbell? If you have not heard of Joseph Campbell, look him up. There is so much wisdom, wealth, knowledge that comes from this man and his work. He has passed away, but he has books, many books written, and he also has this wonderful series that he did for PBS, I believe in the late 80s, and you can watch that series. It is the most powerful mythological breakdown and even synthesis that I've ever heard. You can listen to them. I actually went to Google Play Books and I purchased the audio for those recordings. And I think it's The Power of Myth by Bill Myers is what it's called for those of you who are really interested. But he brings you into the world of myth and archetypes and the hero's journey. I believe Joseph Campbell is the one who coined the hero's journey and really documented it and put it out there in a way that humanity really ran with. But what they're saying is these archetypes, these parts of our being, right? The wounded healer, the child, the victim, the saboteur, all of these different aspects, the warrior, they exist inside of our DNA. They exist inside of our makeup as a human race, not just as one culture. Every single culture has them. And when we understand these stories and we understand these archetypes and we see them not from the personal emotional state that gets us lost and in loop patterns, but from a wider lens, we begin to see that, oh, our story is not that unique. We're not that messed up. We're actually just living out these archetypal themes. And so is everybody else, right? And what our world has told us over and over again, especially in modern society in North America, especially, is that we are separate. We are made to think that our delusion or confusion or trials are something that make us less than. There's not a lot of people that are really open about talking about these things and sharing these things. However, it is changing and growing as time goes by. And as this gift becomes more present in our human awareness, we're beginning to see it more and more. So I think that's really beautiful. It's not being swollen, is that right? No, not being overtaken by our emotional perception of ourselves and our behaviors and our past and our circumstances, and rather learning to see it from a bigger picture. And once we do that and we move outside of those emotional states and patterns, especially of doom and gloom, we can begin to see a path and begin to see something that while we were lost in the emotion, we couldn't see. So let's read a little bit about this city, which is empathy, the great cosmic hub. The 13th city, like its partner, the 7th city, has much secret wisdom hidden within it. Our DNA is an incredible substance. It contains all the memories of our entire species and even those earlier life forms which we descended from. Like a fractal shard of God itself, DNA forms the living, vibrating link to the beginning of life on the planet. Even more profoundly, it connects us to the seed from which our very universe first sprouted. It is through the 13th city that information from our collective past can be recovered. Like a kind of cosmic librarian, it has all the access codes to every volume ever written on the pages of life. We are not just talking information here, but experience. The 13th city can unlock the essence of what it is to experience being a wild panther, or a strawberry, or a mouse. This is the power of empathy. These days, most people use the word empathy without grasping its much deeper connotations. As a fairly modern word, it is almost always confused with sympathy, a much older word coined by Aristotle. In the language of the 64 gene keys, empathy represents acidic vibration and as such cannot be grasped by the mind, because true empathy has nothing whatsoever to do with the mind. The prefix M, within, means within, whereas the prefix sim means with. Herein lies the key to understanding the word. Whereas sympathy means to feel with another person, empathy means to be inside that person. Wow. Most people cannot conceive of being inside another person. So the term has come to be seen as metaphorical and is generally understood as being a mental or emotional projection into another person. Let us reclaim then the true power of this simple word. The city of empathy requires complete dissolution of the individuated self. Once identification with one's form has been cut, empathy reveals itself as the background awareness of all living forms. In other words, we really are inside each other. Whereas sympathy requires two, empathy demands one. Okay, Wow. It's so interesting because as somebody who's done counseling work, soul work, one-to-one work, all of this, there's the word empathy and I'm an empath is thrown around a lot. And to be honest, every time I hear someone claim the title of empath, I feel really uncomfortable and I can feel something incredibly off. I know there's a distortion there, but I've never really been able to put it into words. And as I was reading about what empathy really means there, and as you're listening, it's a whole lot bigger than what we think it is. I am drawn to this place where in my healing work and when I teach from my perspective of how to facilitate powerful healing, one of the things I talk about is being soul to soul. And that being soul to soul is essentially exactly what he's talking about in that book, empathy. It's when you dissolve yourself and your humanness to sit inside another soul, to experience and hold space for them. So I find that quite fascinating in the sense of, yes, this city is incredibly big and we do need to retrain ourselves to understand what empathy really is. It's not, like he said in the book, an emotional or mental projection. It's not a feeling we get. It's not something that, oh, I sense this person's discomfort, so I'm empathetically connecting with them. It's not like that. Wow. So huge. Well, the 13th gene key. You have turned out to be something really special. I'm excited to listen back to this exploration. I listened to all the explorations and have listened to them more than once. I feel like the reason these explorations are so valuable is because there's so many layers and they're speaking to parts of us, if we're truly listening, which I feel something about the gene keys that I want to share is that because Richard, when he wrote them, I wanted to say download, but I really dislike that word sometimes, but brought them forward. He brought them forward from a certain space and place so that when we read his book or we connect with his teachings or go through the Golden Path courses, we actually feel that vibration and we're actually brought to that vibration. This is the power of connecting with people's work who've gone through these places, like even you listening to my work. You feel something because you're truly listening, because the frequency coming through isn't just speaking to the brain, it is full body. So I'm going to be taking with me today this whole concept of listening on a deeper level, and I'm going to bring it into my home with my children, my family, my husband, and really pay attention to, am I listening with my whole body? And that's going to be my practice for the next little while, is actively making sure that I'm listening through every ounce of my body, not just when it comes to spiritual teachings, but when it comes to moment being. I'm really actually excited for this. So thank you so much for being here with me today, for listening to this exploration. Please go through, listen to the other gene key explorations if you haven't yet. Check out my other videos. I love to read your comments and to know how these explorations or any of the sharing of work I do, how it hits you. I love hearing that. So thank you so much again for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode of the Gene Keys Exploration. If you would like to purchase the Gene Key Record Keeper, please go to www.genekeyrecordkeeper.com, or you can go to Amazon and search Gene Key Record Keeper, and you can purchase your very own copy of a sacred companion tool as you learn, track, and move through your gene keys. Have the most beautiful day, and we'll look forward to connecting with you in the next episode. Bye-bye.